Today's show is sponsored by the Airbnb Kickstart course. My wife and I started our first Airbnb here in the last year, and we've come to love the ability to earn more money than we would if we had a long-term rental. If you're interested in starting your Airbnb business with little money, scaling your Airbnb business, or just learning tricks about the industry in general, check out our Airbnb course at nextlevelincome.com/Airbnb. That's AIR, the letters BNB, and you'll get a 20% discount code. On today's show, we have Ian Ippolito. Ian Ippolito is a tech serial entrepreneur. He's also the founder and head of an alternative asset investing club called the Private Investor Club. It has over 5,600 members, $13 billion in investable assets, and it gives investors access to high quality deal flow, detailed due diligence, and special deals that they couldn't do on their own. Ian is also the founder and editor of the investment analysis website called the Real Estate crowdfundingreview.com. Ian has been featured in USA Today, Bloomberg News, The Wall Street Journal, Realtor.com, Curbed, and more. We're excited to dive into all these subjects today with Ian Ippolito.
Welcome to the Next Level Income Show, where it's our goal to raise your income, investments, and life to the next level with your host, Chris Larson. Get your free copy of his book at nextlevelincome.com/book. Also, if you're an accredited investor, check out the Invest link to learn how to gain access to institutional quality real estate opportunities.
Ian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I'm really excited. I started talking to a friend about 2 years ago, and your name came up, and finally we got introduced, and you were gracious enough to join us here on the show today. And I'm excited for you to share your story with the audience, but I'm also really excited for you to share more information about the platform you built, because Next Level Income is all about helping educate investors, educate the next generation here towards financial independence. And you have done, in my opinion, a phenomenal job of building a platform. But before we get into that, Ian, you were a quote unquote serial tech entrepreneur. Maybe you can share a little bit about that story with the audience before we dive more into the investment side.
Sure. I mean, the life of an entrepreneur is a tough one because I think a lot of people think of it as maybe they see successes from certain people. I think, oh, it must be easy. You just go out there and do it. But, I can tell, at least from my point of view and the way a lot of people, but it's a lot of work and a lot of overcoming a lot of adversity and problems. And so it wasn't like I just, people see like a press release and they're like, oh, wow, he had this company and he sold it and, he did great. Yeah, but it took me 10 years to build that company. And before that, 5 or 6 other companies that people don't see that, I built and, had different problems or, died or whatever. But, I used to be a computer programmer but I always wanted that idea of I want to be my own boss, and so I want to be independent. And a lot of times, I would go into these companies and they wouldn't necessarily listen to me. And, I wanted to be able to make decisions and things like that. So I had the idea, I want to be my own boss. So what I did was I basically created this computer program. It was called the Power Launcher. This was a while ago. And I thought, I have this idea. I have this product. Everyone's going to love it. I took a long time to write it and learn about it, but I finally did it. And I launched it. And seriously, it's got to be the most unpopular software ever created. It had zero sales. It's never had a sale. I was the only person that ever used it. It was miserable. Wow. And I couldn't get anyone to buy this thing. And I was like, but I put so much effort and I loved this thing. I thought it was fantastic. And so it took me a while because I invested time and money about it. It was pretty depressing, right? To do that and to fail. And so. And I was like, you know what, though? I made some mistakes. I didn't research my market to ask people what they actually wanted. I did a whole bunch of things I probably shouldn't have because I didn't know what I was doing. So after a couple months, I dusted myself off. I said, let me try again. I think I can do better. And I like this idea. I want to be my own boss. So I tried again. This time I wrote another program called Helpmaker Plus. It helped people do help files. Now, this time I interviewed people and what was nice about this one, and I learned from the first one, I distributed better. And what was awesome is it started to work. I I created it one time, and then people would pay me to register it, which was a cool thing. It's like you write it one time, and then I would get these checks in the mail from people who were the product. Now, I still had to upgrade it and, support bugs and stuff. So it wasn't 100% work free. It still was work, but it was really cool. And eventually I got so many checks, I was able to buy a car, which was like, wow, this is awesome. So, so I was doing really good. I was loving this new business, and I ran it for years. And then all of a sudden one day I got some bad news. So so Microsoft came in. Microsoft is like the big elephant in the room with a lot of software stuff. So they came in one day, and basically the elephant came down with a big foot and stomped on me and basically said, you know what? We need a tool that makes help files, which is exactly what I was doing. We'll create one and give it away for free. So so I was like, well, there goes my business completely destroyed that I just spent 2 years building. So again, a very, very tough, experience. And I was like, very, very, upset after it was done, and had to get up and dust myself off and think. And I was like, you know what? It worked. Okay. It's not like it didn't, and it worked a lot better than the first time. I just need something where I need to kind of keep up with what's going on. And I need some protection against these big elephants from stomping me. I need something a little bit more protected. So I thought about it. It took me a while. It took me actually a couple of years to kind of come up with the next idea, and build it, which was this idea called Planet Source Code. It was this website. Today, everyone knows the idea of open source. At least programmers do. It's like where they share source to build stuff. Back then, there was no such thing. So basically, created the first open source website before it had a name, and it didn't get popular right away. It took a lot of time. It just grew slowly by word of mouth. But I thought, this is super useful. So I think it's worth doing. So it grew and it grew, and eventually it was in probably like $6,000 or $7,000 a month of of revenues. And I was like, this is doing good. Let me ramp it up. Let me do better. So what I would do is I would sell ads. So, and back then, this is early internet days. So I could sell an ad to like Oracle for 60 CPM, which means show an ad up at the top of the screen and get $60 for showing it 1,000 times. Now, today I might get like 50 cents or something for the same amount. Like, people don't pay that. But back then, understood. So it's like, it was the Wild West, and the companies were just throwing all this money out, and they had to be on the internet. And so it was a very good time for people who had websites, and actually it was very hard to write a website back then. So not like
you had to code it. Yeah, we had a whole class in college, and it was actual coding.
Yeah, HTML, and you had to do ASP and all this backend stuff and tie it to databases. Yeah, so it was a lot of work, but it worked. And so I was like, you know what? I need to ramp this up. It's like, it's working. I don't think I'm gonna get stomped on. I'm gonna ramp it up. So I took a risk. Basically said, back then you couldn't get broadband internet. So I was like, I'm going to pay for these long-term contracts to have these T1 lines installed to my house, these high-speed internet lines. Nice. Yeah. It's because like I had all this bandwidth. I need more people to come in so I can make more money. So it was a risk because each one was 1 year long. I think it was $50 per month per T1 line. So it was a lot of money, right? For me at the time. It was like a ridiculous amount of money for me at the time, but the company was making enough to cover it. I thought I could do it. And at first it worked. So it's like, probably worked, I would say for, almost a year. And I was like doing better and better. And I actually hired a couple people, and I was building my business. It was awesome. And then one day it was 2001, actually. I know exactly when it was. It was the .com crash basically happened. The way I figured it out was just all of a sudden, some people that owed me money were like, hey, we can't really pay these companies. We can't pay you this month, but we'll pay you next month. I was like, all right. And then next month came, but never paid. And then more companies said, you know what, we can't pay you. And, we're canceling this contract, and, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden I went from like flying high to nothing. It's like .com crash came in and wiped it all out. And I had the T1 lines, these commitments that I had made, and the phone company wasn't going to let me out of those commitments. So I was in deep, deep trouble. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And that was the hardest time I probably ever had. And I thought, what am I going to do? And again, it was like psychologically, I had to get into that headspace of being able to figure out what to do, because the stress, the financial stress, all that other stuff, and was killing me. But I finally got my head. It probably took about a month to kind of get where I could actually just kind of think about it. And I thought, well, you know what? I have something that's valuable. I have these computer programmers, even though no one wants to pay for them. They're valuable. It's like, what else could I do with these people? And I thought, you know what? They're always bugging me all the time. They're like, can you write this program for me? And I'm like, I don't have the time to do that. I'm trying to run Planet source code. So I was like, what if I could create, and I don't want to write programs for them. Like, I don't want to be a programmer. I want to be my own boss. I want to run a company. What if I created a website where like people who wanted programmers could find them and people that were programmers that could do work remotely? And so, I was coding up a storm and just like writing up this idea, like, what if I make it work? And I have to have protections. And it was a complicated idea, but so it took about 2 or 3 months. I wrote something up. I was like, I think this can work. I think this could be a really big idea. So I put it out there, and I think it made like $5 or something like that in the first month. So I was like, okay, well, positive money. I guess that's good. It's money. That's good. But $5 is not going to solve my problems. So not even close. So it's like, I need to ramp this up somehow. I just worked on that thing, and, word of mouth and marketing. I read all sorts of books on marketing and learned about different things, and it started to build momentum. And finally it got to the point where I could pay off my bills. So I was like, oh, thank goodness, Yeah, that was like a huge, huge relief. I could pay the bills. I was okay. I going to be a problem there. And I started actually making more money than that. And I was like, okay, now I'm back in business finally, right? So, and then I got a really awesome break. So what it was a reporter from the Wall Street Journal was using the website. He goes, this is amazing. Like, to me, it's like, this is amazing. I've never seen anything like this. I just hired someone from India, and I don't know him. And I asked him for pictures, and he sent pictures of his family, and I was like, so cool. And he wrote this thing that I've been trying to get done for years, and I couldn't get it done. And he said, would it be okay if I could write about you in the Wall Street Journal? I was like, come on, right? Who's going to say no?
Let me think about it.
Yeah, exactly. Let me think for about 0 milliseconds. And it's like, please. So he wrote that article, and it was a turning point, because once the Wall Street Journal picked it up, then CBS News has to pick it up, and Fox and Business News, and like once one of them picks it up, they all have to pick it up. So it became this kind of a snowballing thing where it just got bigger and bigger, and it really, and I started hiring more employees. I was working out of my house this whole time, moved into an office, eventually upgraded to another office, eventually hired 10, 15 employees, had a whole bunch of contractors, so grew it to finally, had a business after all those failures of growing into a nice, big, decent size, and was happy with where I was at. And I was like, I'm going to run this for the rest of my life. But, life kind of intervened, so I met a person who's my wife now, and she, and we were going to have a baby. So, and I was working crazy out to make that kind of stuff happen. So it's like, I can't continue like this. And it's like, I'll be a stranger to my son. So it's like, 70, 80 a week. It's not uncommon. It's like an emergency. I just have to jump on it. Yeah. So, I thought I need a change. And right at that time, it's funny because there was this competitor who'd been bugging me every quarter or so. He's like, hey, let me see your numbers and I'll probably buy you. And I was like, he's full of it. I'm not believing any of this. He just wants to see what I'm doing, and so he can steal the information. That's what I thought. And so I kept blowing him off. And so one day he wrote, and it was right around that time. He goes, hey, Ian, this is not official yet, but we just purchased the other that's lower beneath you in the rankings. Like, we were like, I don't know, number 3 or something, and like number 4 site. And don't tell anyone, but and talk to him and ask him what happened. So it's like, wow. So I call up that guy, and he's a very serious guy normally. And I call him up on the phone. He was like laughing, and he was like, wow, this is not what's going on here. And he's like, yeah, they made me an offer. And now I'm just about to go on this trip. I'm going around the world, and I'm like doing all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, that sounds really good. So I was like, okay, they're serious. So I worked it out. It took a while to negotiate. We negotiated the deal. I sold it, and I was finally done. This is after probably like 15 years, right? Of like working. And finally, I was done. And at first it was strange, but it took a couple of weeks, but after a sudden it was like this weight was just like off my shoulders, which I didn't even realize was there. Like, because I love working actually. It's like, I'm a hard worker. I love working hard, but there was all this stress and so it was gone. I was like, wow, this is awesome. But then give it another, 2 or 3 months. And I'm like, no, is this really all that's kind of going on now? Because it's like some people like play golf or they do tennis or whatever. And it's like, I can't, that's not enough for me to get excited. I'm not going to get excited. But it's great for people to love it and they have something they love. That's not going to get me excited to wake up. So I was like, I need something else. And I was like, well, time. And actually, I won't even, I'm probably going on too long. So I won't even go, I tried other things too. And, I created a video game actually. And the video game also had a thing where it's like, wow, it did really, really great at first. It was making a ton of money. And then it got stomped on. But basically the person that the language that it was in shut down. And basically I lost all my source code. And so, I had ups and downs and things like that. But eventually I was like, my investments now are doing good enough to support me. I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is passive investing. This is a lot less work than, what I'm used to. And so I think I really need to focus on that. So I started focusing on my passive investing. And so, yes. And at the time there was this called, real estate crowdfunding had just become popular. And there was a lot of ways to invest. Go ahead.
So let's pause right there. Cause I think this is a great point to start the new chapter kind of in your life here and talk about what year that was. But before we do, I want to hit on a few things you talked about, Ian, because it's so important. I think in today's day and age, I'd love your thoughts on this. You see on social media, people are talking about, oh, this is like, look at this, look at that. You see the good stuff. You don't see all the bad stuff that's going on. People put their best selves up there. It's like if we had Polaroids, we'd shuffle through and we put like the best, 1 out of 10 up, right? Like every day. And you get this complex. And I always tell people like, I never thought I was that smart. And I never thought I was that great of an athlete because I'm racing with professionals and I'm hanging out with neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons. I'm like, and then you go on the road, you're like, well, I'm okay. I'm not terrible. It's wild when you do that. And then you also talk about, I want to really focus on the entrepreneurial journey. So, a lot of people, they have this idea, they say, hey, it's like, I want to be an entrepreneur. There's the E-Myth, right? Michael Gerber.
Yes.
But I heard a phenomenal analogy earlier this week. I was listening to a podcast and they talked about the iceberg and they said, only the people that know you and are closest to you know what went on beneath the surface for all those years. Everybody else just sees the tip of the iceberg floating on top. And your story really highlights this.
So true. I mean, people just saw that announcement, the press release, and they're like, "Oh, wow, that's so great."
What a lucky guy!
See all exactly. Oh, he's so lucky, but you don't see the blood, sweat, and tears. And I didn't even tell you 1% of the crazy things that went on, right? So it's like where it was like, oh my gosh, the business is about to die unless I can figure something out. So it's like, yes, I'm with that 100%.
You know what I mean? I think whether you look at, entrepreneurs like yourself that have built amazing businesses and gone on to have successful exits, athletes, we look at these pro athletes and we think this, but the best pro athletes, like Tiger Woods, he started playing when he was like 3 years old, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Crazy. Yes.
Yeah. And it's just amazing. So, I spent 18 years in my industry, before, my investments really started to pay off. And, people say, well, when did you start investing in real estate, Chris? I said, well, before I started my medical device career, because they think, hey, I did this in a few years, which hopefully between our conversation today, we can help them shave years off that journey. So I think it was around 2015 that you founded the Private Investor Club. Is that accurate? Was that around the time?
It was right around then. So at 2013, I created that real estate crowdfunding review, which kind of led to the Private Investor Club, because it was like, hey, I'm interested in this. And I had done research on all these different sponsors and people kept asking me for the information. The word got out and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to send the 100th person this email, my due diligence. Look, it's on a website. Just go look on this website. I put it out there. And that became the real estate crowdfunding review. And now it gets like maybe 12,000, 15,000 investors coming every month. But, it's a free thing. Yeah. I put it out there. It's just like, enjoy it, but I was like, I need more.
And we'll have this in the show notes, but it's the realestatecrowdfundingreview.com.
Yes.
And you tell me if this is accurate, but I love you were talking about open source coding. I think you've created like an open source investor network. Is that a good way to describe that?
That is, yeah. Yeah, that's basically what it is, because everything is transparent and it's shared. It's like, I individually, I don't know everything about a whole bunch of things, but when you have a whole bunch of people, like 5,000 people, there's people that are experts on everything. And with that collaboration, you get that open source kind of investing experience that you're talking about. Yeah.
So you started the real estate crowdfunding review in 2013.
2013.
That started to get traction. Then what was the next step in this whole?
There were problems. So I was like, you know what? So it's like public internet. And a lot of times these sponsors don't want their information on the public internet. So I can't really talk about a lot of things I want to talk about. And, and I was like, I need a private space. So it's like, let me create a private club where we can, first of all, people can bring good deals. It's always hard to find good deals and good sponsors. People can bring them in together. We can do that open source, collective due diligence where I don't know how to do it, someone else hopefully does. And then together we can figure stuff out. And then sometimes we can bring together enough to a sponsor where it's more than I can bring individually for sure. And they're like, oh, hey, well, excuse me. So then they're like, well, we'll give you a discount or, whatever, because this is, a large chunk of money. So, so those are the reasons I created it. And, I thought, but it can't be like a lot of these other investment clubs. It's like, they charge money to get in. So now they've got a conflict of interest, or they're charging money to refer people over to the sponsor. So that's a conflict of interest. I'm like, I don't want any of that. So no one's charged for anything. It's, people come in, they are vetted because we have to make sure people aren't. Here's the other thing. We had people trying to sneak in to kind of do bad things. So, yeah, exactly. To pitch their deals. That's exactly. Exactly. And pretend that they're investors. And so we have to vet for that. And so we don't allow that. It's not, we don't charge people to come in. So and that just keeps everything very clean. And, there's no conflict of interest for the club itself.
Yeah. So what's in it for you then?
Well, a couple of things. So first of all, one, I get access to all these. So I get access to the deals that I wouldn't normally, because now life is passive investing. So it's my livelihood, right? So it's like, I want my passive investing to be good. So it's like, I get access to the deals and actually the due diligence. Again, I wouldn't invest in some of these deals without, being able to kind of have other people to bounce ideas off of. The discounts are great. But the other thing is my due diligence process is really severe. It's like I have a ton of questions I like to ask people, and some sponsors can get kind of upset with it because they're like, why are you asking about all these sort of things? Yeah, you would think not, but there are definitely some that are like, oh, is this person ever going to buy? Because he keeps coming up with more questions,
Yeah,
it's
just a tire kicker, right? And maybe
exactly.
I could see that, or maybe taking the opposite stance and saying, well, they're just trying to figure out what we're doing so they can structure something differently, or.
Yeah. Are they like, are they for real? There's always all these questions. It's like, I'm a conservative investor, and these are the things I need to get answered. So before the club, I would always have that kind of risk. That one would be like, nope, we're done. Sorry, I'm not answering any more questions. But
wow.
Yeah. And, a lot of times I felt that was a good sign that, I would just walk fine. But, I do think occasionally it was just probably a misinterpretation of what was going on. And now with the club, that doesn't happen. They're like, well, if we get rid of him, now we're getting rid of all these other people. Like, we'll take them seriously. And we've gotten actually many compliments. And they've said, the due diligence the club has done is more than some of these institutional investors are doing. So, now it's a compliment and not an insult. So that's good.
No, I think it's fantastic. And, when I talk to investors, and, about once a month, I get an investor who just runs me through the ringer. I get on our initial call, and for 30 minutes, they ask me questions, and I usually compliment them at the end. And sometimes they're like, hey, I'm really sorry. And I say, no, because, I look at it, the more education that an investor does on the front end, the better that an investor understands a sponsor and a deal and a sector, the more confidence that investor is going to have. And the better it's going to be for both the sponsor or the operator, as well as the investor in the long run.
I totally agree. And these sponsors that I have kind of done that too, basically, once I understand them and I check off the box and go, yes, I become like their biggest fan. And I'm like telling everyone about, you got to check out, so-and-so because basically I really, really understand at that point. And I do feel really confident. So yeah, that's great. And that's great that you take the time to do that.
Yeah, but it's amazing. And Ian, you've created the framework so that other investors can learn the process and the practice on how to do that and how to vet sponsors and deals, which I think is cool. I want to ask some of your predictions and some of your thoughts on what's going on today in the economy and what you and the your club are focused on. But you also touched on something, and it reminded me of Rich Dad Poor Dad, which most of my books are digital now, but I keep some special books, and Rich Dad Poor Dad is one of those, right? And he talks about, and I wish I could flash it on the screen here, but the quadrants, right? He talks about the 4 quadrants.
Yes,
he talks about employee, self-employed, business owner, and then the investor. And
yes.
I pulled this up here. And if you look at the flow, so typically kind of the flow that Rich Dad Poor Dad talks about is moving from employee to self-employed to business owner, as you did, Ian. And then the ultimate is moving to that lower right quadrant, which is the investor quadrant. I mean, and your story is like straight out of Rich Dad.
It's kind of, yeah, exactly. I'm like walking through this. Yes. Yeah. I agree with everything in there. And it is, each step is better than the last. So it's like, it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah. So if you're listening today and you're not familiar with the quadrants that Rich Dad Poor Dad talks about, check it out. Because that's exactly what Ian's talked about. So Ian, you guys see a ton of deal flow. I've read through some of your blogs, going back through the last 2 years and looking at your analysis during COVID, which I really like, because I caught a story coming out of China in late 2019 with coronavirus and SARS-CoV-2. And I was like, wow, there's something to this.
What's
because
going on?
The financial markets, it really, kind of got me. And you can go back and listen to some of the podcasts I was on, because I said, hey, investors need to be very cautious here. As we stand today during this recording, it's May of 2022, and the stock market has had a terrible start to the year. Some of the markets have had their worst start to the year, worst month here in a couple decades. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from investors? And how is this affecting your investments and your thought for the rest of this year?
Sure. First, I'll back up a second and just say the club is so diverse, that on any topic, there's always going to be a bunch of opinions on it. So, I can't speak for the club. I can just say and it also depends on someone's kind of risk tolerance. Like,
great point.
If someone sees things going bad, they can look at it 2 ways. They can say, oh man, that stinks, I lost money. Or they can look at it and say, oh, there could be an opportunity here to make some money. So, and all that's good. Everyone's coming at it from their own place, and what makes sense for them and their financial goals and their family. So the club is really big on not trying to say, hey, this is the way to invest, or like what you should do. So it's like the answer for everyone is different now. But I will say this. So the club focuses on alternative investments. So we don't do any, and we end up talking about the public market stuff anyway, but it's supposed to be, mainly focused on that. So one of the advantages of the investments is a lot of times they're not directly correlated to the other investments. For example, as you know, real estate, it does have its cycles and it goes up and down, but not the stock market cycles, which are much more frequent up and downs and much more volatile. Yeah. So basically that part, so people can say, oh, well, our portfolio is looking pretty bad right now, but hey, at least my real estate is doing well, and rental income is up and prices are up, and this sort of thing. So that's what, so I'm seeing a lot of that where people are like, hey, I'm glad that I diversified, because I didn't follow the traditional advice, just put X amount in stocks and X in bonds, because I'd be totally freaking out right now. It's like I have more diversity, and when some things are working, some aren't, different parts of the engine can kind of kick in. And that's the whole point, right? Like,
if you're overloaded in one sector, like things can be great one day and they can be horrible another day. Whereas if you're diversified, you get a smoother trajectory, but you don't have those highs and lows. But ultimately, I call it, it's called variance drag. The less variable, the less volatile your portfolio is, assuming everything else, you're going to do better over the long run.
Yes, exactly. And so there's a lot of people that I think they're kind of taking this as an opportunity to remind themselves, of that risk, because it's actually very easy to go, let's go all in on the stock market when it's like shooting up to the sky. Or, let's go all in on Bitcoin, or let's go all in on, whatever it is. So it's like, I think for most people, it's been a good reminder, hey, I need to be diversified. And so like I gave the example of real estate. Eventually real estate will crash just like everything else. I'm not going to put 100% in real estate, but I want it in my portfolio. And there's a lot of different ways I can put real estate in my portfolio that can even diversify there, because I can diversify by asset class. I can diversify. Multifamily is different than triple net lease. And, that's different than self-storage. And they all have their own unique characteristics and can hold up in different types of recessions. So, and historically have done it. So personally, this is just personally what I like to do. I like to diversify. And so we're in a situation now where, stock market has done badly. We've got a weird thing, which is this inflation that we haven't seen in decades, right? So it's like people don't know what to deal with it. And we know the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates. And that's also kind of a weird thing, because it's like we've had a couple times where it's gone briefly up, but never where there was a danger of it going like way up to fight inflation. So so there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And I'll say, I will not, I'm very humble about a lot of this stuff. And it's like, I feel to try to predict what's going to happen a year from now is almost, I feel very, very difficult. I would say impossible, right? Like, I can't tell you inflation is going to be, it's going to be X% in a year from now. Like, I don't know. Basically, what I do is I kind of plan. I'm like, well, I want to plan for if it's way up here, and I want to plan for if it's down here. And then that way I can sleep no matter what happens. So, so I like, for example, real estate tends to keep up with inflation, because one of the characteristics of inflation is rent, and rent is driving real estate, so, so if inflation is kind of like bad, but in that middle range, like not like hyperinflation, real estate's probably going to do pretty good. So I have real estate in my portfolio. But you know what? I have things like, but this is an awesome thing if people aren't already aware of it, but you can go to Treasury Direct and you can invest $10,000. It's the maximum that you can do to get these inflation bonds. They limit you to just $10,000. And
are these tips?
Tips, exactly.
Tips.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So Ian, you were just mentioning how you like inflation protected treasuries or options right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's so you're only limited to the 10,000, like I said, but I want to say it was something like 7 or 8% that a person is getting, and there's like an income component and an inflation component, and right now the inflation component is huge. So, and it's backed by the U.S. government. So when you talk about risk, you've got like default by the U.S. government is like one of the lowest possible risks you can take. So it's really great risk versus reward, I think, and like I said, only $10,000. But for example, if you have a business, you can do $10,000 for your business, and you can get $10,000 usually personally. And there's actually ways to open up multiple accounts.
Yeah, I remember when they first came out with tips, and I was in college, and I was like, well, this is interesting. And, I had a percentage allocation for a long time in my portfolio for that. Mm-hmm. And then basically inflation went away. So I was like, well, this doesn't really make much sense anymore.
Yeah.
But no, well, and funny enough, I literally just had a conversation with an investor yesterday who said, well, hey, what are some other options out there, for income?
Yes.
And he's in Europe. And I said, well, do you know what tips are? And he goes, yeah, we don't have those here. So,
too bad.
Yeah. We got
it's like a free giveaway. Really, it is. It's awesome.
Yeah. So, and I think, look, this is, when you talk about, one of the big things I talk about is liquidity drag, normally it's like, okay, it's more of an opportunity cost when you have money sitting in your bank account, right? Mm-hmm. But listen, this can be money in your bank account, your checking or savings or business account. It could also be equity in homes that you have. And I think right now, not only do you have that opportunity cost, but I was talking to a friend and he's like, yeah, I just haven't decided. He spent a year with $500,000 in the bank. I said, man, inflation is just munching away at that.
Eating it up. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I don't, the other thing I should say, people shouldn't feel pressured. I also think people can also feel the opposite. They feel pressured. Oh, I got to make a move. I got to do something. And they'll like just jump into the first thing. And I think that's also a mistake. It's like, what I do is I just take my time. I think of it like a bus, it's like, I might miss the current bus because maybe it takes off, but there's going to be another bus. And usually it's going to the exact same destination. It may not be the exact same one, but it'll probably get me there.
Yeah. And I forget if it might have been Robert Kiyosaki again, but the saying is the opportunity of a lifetime comes along every single day.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it. I love that. That sounds great. I hadn't heard that before. That's awesome.
Yeah. But I love that saying. And the point, to your point, Ian, like, it's like my point to my friend was, inaction is, he's like, I need to figure out like what to do. I said, well, not doing something is doing something too, but you have to be comfortable in your choice. And, I think that's what, look, you have built a tremendous community. We've only touched on, such a small piece, I feel, today, Ian. If the audience wants to get in touch, if they want to learn more about what you're doing, how they can participate, we're going to have these in the show notes, but what are the best ways to get in touch with you?
So the best way is through www.privateinvestorclub.com. And the other site that I mentioned too, people might want to check out, is therealestatecrowdfundingreview.com. I'm usually at privateinvestorclub.com. That's where I spend most of the time.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Again, I encourage everybody to check out the resources that Ian talks about. Again, like I call it, open source investing. Pull your knowledge, pull your resources, figure out what other people are doing, what people that have been successful like Ian are doing to create passive income that has allowed them to live their best lives, give back to other people, spend time with your wonderful 8-year-old son. And Ian, I appreciate you spending some of that time with us today and sharing your story with the audience.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Hey, Chris here again. I hope you found this episode valuable. Now, I have one more thing to gift you. We have a page for my coaching clients where you can get a free copy of my book, as well as much more from previous guests on the show. Just check out nextlevelincome.com/coaching to get a free copy of my book, audiobook, and much more. I'll send you a copy of my book and cover all the shipping costs as a thank you for listening to the podcast. Also, please like, share, and take just 90 seconds to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts.